It's great to have millions and millions of dollars, but if you can't do anything with it, you can't have vacations with your family, you can't watch your kid grow up, you can't do any of those things. Like, that's not enjoyable.
What's up, guys? My name is Logan Tremelin, and this is the Defying Odds podcast. Today, I interview a good friend of mine, Nico Delgiorno, and we get into why he left a $100,000 job to take a sales-based, commission-only job, how he sends out 360,000 flyers and buys 150 houses per year, and the reasoning behind his never-ending business growth. So, Nico, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This is Nico Delgiorno. Yes, his last name is just like the pizza. I had to clarify with him.
I've been living with that my whole life.
Yeah, so give me a quick little bio about you.
Yeah, so I work in the real estate department, or the real estate industry. I've been doing it for about 2.5 years. I live here in Lancaster. We're based out of York. I have a wife, expecting our first baby girl. We just found out on Friday, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, congrats.
But yeah, no, I've been kind of here my entire life. I grew up here. Wife and I, we moved to York for about 1.5 years or so, and realized that all of our friends were here in Lancaster, and no one wanted to come to us, and we never wanted to go to them. So we sold that and came back to Lancaster, back to home base, and yeah, so here we are.
Big picture, what do you tell people that you do for a living? So obviously it's a lot more scale than you just made it out to be.
Yeah. So pretty much I would say that real estate investor is probably the best thing, or the easiest way to explain it. So I actually work for a company, but I also have my own portfolio. I've done some of my own flips. I'm actually just finishing one up right now. So I guess the easiest or the most basic way is to say, real estate investor kind of across the board. So that's pretty much what I do through and through, whether it's for who I work for, or doing it myself. And I don't ever see myself probably leaving this industry, that's for sure.
Awesome. So now you work for a company where you buy and flip houses, and you personally have 10 properties. You said that you want to get 10 to 15 more this year.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning.
I have 11
You have 11.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so.
damn. So let's go back to the beginning.
Yep.
How did you get into just working? How did you get into sales?
Yep.
What was your job before that?
Yeah.
And go from there.
So I actually I went to school at Alvernia, which is in Reading. Went for business and finance. Pretty much after I left there, I went and worked for an investment company up in Philadelphia called SCI. They're probably one of the biggest investment firms kind of in the area here. Worked there for a little while. It was a long commute. Didn't love it. Driving an hour and 15 minutes up and down the Schuylkill sucks. So I ended up leaving there. Went and worked for another investment company local here, more wealth management stuff. And I was more like the back end side of things. And I always kind of knew I wanted to, I'm not a behind the desk type person. I'm, I need to be out talking to people, sitting there and, analyzing charts for the people that are making trades is not my forte. Yes, yeah. I like numbers. I'm pretty good with them. But I need to talk to people. I was just going insane. So ended up leaving there, and then went and worked for another company where I was doing sales, kind of, grew the company pretty decently, still kind of, did well, just wasn't the best fit. Unfortunately, I didn't love going to work all the time. We just kind of had one of those, falling outs. And so I pretty much one day was like, oh, this is it. So we I was unemployed for almost 4 to 5 months. Had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to go back to finance. I really didn't even know what I wanted to do. So I just pretty much figured I'll wait it out. Wife and I just bought a new house at the time. So being unemployed for 5 months, just buying a house, pretty much depleted all of my savings. Had nothing that I could really kind of, do. I mean, I did some small odd and end stuff here and there, but she was kind of helping to float the mortgage, and Next thing I know, I was scrolling through Facebook, and the owner of the company I work for now had a had a post that said looking for manager and sales positions. So I was like, all right, well, we'll see what it is. So I reached out and ended up having an interview. And long story short, when I got to the interview, I said, nope, don't want to do this. No, I don't. Don't want to be because I thought it was a real estate agent because I was at a real estate office. And then ended up having the first interview. After the first interview, I went home, talked to my wife about it, and was like, oh, this isn't so bad. Like, it doesn't seem terrible. See what happens. Still didn't love it, though. One of the big reasons was because it was a commission-based pay. It was sales, although we're buying, but sales, commission-based. Wife wasn't loving it, but at the end of the day, she's supportive of whatever I want to do. And went for the second interview, and afterwards I was like, hey, yeah, I think I want to do this. And then what happened was I had another job offer, 6-figure job offer, traditional way, take it, work there for however long, all your life problems are solved. And my dad was the one that was like, don't do it, take the other job. Commission, all of his wealthiest friends, you could say, were commission sales. There's no cap to it. And that's something that I feel like I am as a person where, if I don't have a cap, I'm going to continue to grow and continue to rise, where I don't feel like I'm just going in and doing the monotonous work every single day and I get a paycheck every week or every other week. I have to budget now for the most part. I get paid monthly, and it's all commission. It's everything that I do. So he's the one that pushed me. My mom was way against it. My wife was just kind of like, whatever you think. But by the way, you don't have any money, and we got to pay our mortgage in a month. I was like, all right, well, guess we got to figure this out.
Yeah.
So we did, and I ended up taking the job. And I'll tell you, I've made a ton of mistakes in my life. This is probably the one that I don't ever regret.
Yeah.
So
you had a 6-figure job offer, and you turned it down to go commission only. What do you think your dad's belief was around commission only that he pushed you? Obviously, we both agree that that's the right choice, especially now looking back.
Right.
But in that decision, when you have a mortgage, when you have a wife who's going to yell at you if you don't make money, you have bills due,
exactly,
and you choose a route where you have to perform or else you don't get paid, most people wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I think he just more or less, he's probably one of my biggest believers. He actually, plot twist, works for the company now also. So I think he's one of the big believers just in me. I know my wife was very supportive. She knew that whatever I was going to do well. And same with him. I took a lot of into what he said into account, just because he's been successful his entire life. So obviously, as a son, you're always going to look back at your father and you're going to take that guidance as much as possible. And the fact that he told me, who at that time was, getting paid a very healthy salary, and most parents would probably say, hey, you have to pay your bills, like you have to do this, you just bought a house, like you have to go and get that job. Like, before then I was maybe making $65,000 a year. So to make $100,000 a year guaranteed, like, you're like, oh, okay, this is really awesome. And no, I think he knew, and he knew, and even myself too. I think what helped the decision is, one, my back was kind of against the wall too, so I knew that I was going to have to figure something out. But I think also the fact that, like, he knew me as a person that, no matter what situation I get into, I'm a people person. I like to talk. It's one of those things that I think he knew that I was just going to be able to excel, especially when there's no cap to it.
Yeah.
When it's almost like working for yourself, but not really working for yourself. Like I have a boss, and I have an owner of a company that I kind of report to. I'm very fortunate to a point where he kind of lets me run my side of things and check in here and there. But I also didn't really want to have to work for somebody. Sorry, Eric, if you're watching this, but like, yes, I do work for him, but like I do have pretty decent free reign to a point where, I still have to meet our goals. But I think my dad just really knew that, no matter, I think that I would excel. I was a no cap, be able to, sky's the limit. Just, he knew me obviously as a person. I've known him for a really long time. So I think he believed that, whatever I was going to do, I was going to make sure that, one, I was going to be able to provide for my family, and at that point, my wife, but also, with my back being against the wall, not making any money, not really having a whole lot of money, just being able to get out there and get after it.
And you took that job with zero sales experience previously. Obviously, you said you're great with people, but you took a commission-only sales job without any experience.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I would say the only true sales experience that I actually ever had, I worked at New York Life, I kind of skipped this part, but I worked at New York Life selling life insurance for about 2 months out of college. So I went from there to the Philly investment firm. But yeah, I didn't have really any sales experience. I never once had a sales job. I wasn't the guy in, Walmart asking you about your electric bill. I didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It was just, I had no experience. Everything was behind a computer, running numbers, talking to people. I mean, I've had a lot of jobs where I interacted with people, but it was never like, hey, I need to sell, or in this instance, yes, I'm buying, but it is more of a sales position.
Yeah.
But I never had any of that, never had any training. The only real training was I came in and trained with my boss.
Yeah.
That was it. So no.
How much of a factor of you taking that job and your success when you first started do you think came from you not having an option, you burning the boats to say, where you literally you were up against the wall and you could not do good? You know?
So funny too. So not only was it about 4 or 5 months that I wasn't working, and very minimal, I would say. Very minimal money left. I wasn't fully out. I still had a couple. But then it was probably the first month, maybe almost 2 months, that I didn't even get paid as I was working because I needed to kind of build up a pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough. And it also didn't help that, I think the day that I started my job, and again, barely had money, just pretty much enough to help cover, mortgage, utilities, but not. And then everything went wrong at my house. So, the day that I started my new job, our garage door broke. So I had to get that fixed, and this and that. Everything was going on. So it really was just one of those things that I had to jump in, head first and just go after it. And I think that was, I know I didn't want to fail. And I know that, or I knew at that point, whatever I was going to do, being almost 30 years old at that point, whatever I was going to do was going to probably be one of the last things that I do in a career situation. So I think that played a huge factor of this is it. This is make or break, especially with it being, because if I was going to go an extra 3 months without getting paid, we were going to be in some big time trouble. Mm-hmm. So I just knew that I had to go in head first, and that was that.
So how long were you working there? You said it took a few months before you started getting paid. How long did it take you to get your feet and to figure things out and to start actually producing results?
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. So the owner of our company, Eric, he's probably one of the best home buyers in the area. He did what I do before, and then for another company, and then started his own company. So I was fortunate that I got to kind of learn underneath of him. When I came in, it was actually me and another guy, and he was able to train both of us, and I just pretty much absorbed everything. I mean, unfortunately, I was working late hours. I was up late, doing all the things that I needed to do, preparing for, our appointments the next day, and just really kind of absorbing everything. So I actually purchased my first house kind of with him also, so under his guidance during training. I think we had a 60 or 90-day training period, and I purchased my first property like 3 or 4 weeks into being there. So I was like, sorry, man, I got to make money. Like we got to figure this out. And I've made mistakes on the way, to where I'm at now, and bad purchases, whatever the case may be. But I think 2 months in was when I got my first paycheck. 3 months in was when I got like my first big boy paycheck, and I was like, all right, this I could get used to this. So it was nice, able to kind of get caught back up on some of the things that we had going on, and just kind of get back on the feet. So it was about 3 months. So I would say it was almost 6 months that I went, no money coming in, and my wife was able to foot the bill for the little bit there, but I didn't get all the cool amenities that I wanted and have now. So.
Yeah. So in texting you, it was a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, I remember I was like, how do you go about getting your sales, getting your leads? And I forget what you said, but it was just, it surprised me how much scale you actually do.
Yeah.
So take me into a little bit of what you actually do, how you have this many sales. Obviously, people hear like house flipping, whatever, they might think like, do you do 1 a year or 2 a year, or how?
So basic, getting into kind of what I do, just a little bit more. So we purchase properties. The company does a mixture of everything: rental properties, flips, wholesales. I would say our main business is wholesaling, but I think right now we have 7 flips going on, and I think we have 2 more that are about to be in the pipeline. So as an overall, most of what we do is all direct to seller. So I'm going in, sitting down with people at their kitchen table, listening to what they have going on. It could be a mixture of everything. Losing a house, somebody passed away, just tired of dealing with it. I mean, you name it, I've pretty much seen it all. And we purchase anywhere from about. It's kind of a broad range because it really depends on the season, I guess. But anywhere from about 10 to 15 properties a month is what I'm purchasing for the company. And then in there, a couple here and there, like I'll be able to purchase from the company. So I, pay the company a little bit of money so they make their money, and then I have a property for myself. But how we get there is the crazy thing. So my dad is the operations guy, does a lot of the marketing. So it's a basic math problem, and they just pretty much break it down. We need this many leads for that many appointments for this many buys, depending on buy it at like a 22%, rate, I guess you could say, is kind of where I'm at purchasing wise, which I think national average is like 16 to 20-ish. So I'm a little bit higher, but if we can keep scaling, it's going to make life a lot easier. But I also want to kind of at a point now where I don't want to have to be running and gunning all the time, especially with the little one on the way. But I think, and I don't know exact numbers, but I do know that we probably spend as a company 50 to 60 grand a month just in our marketing budget. Maybe 40 to 60. I'm going to throw a broad range because I'm not quite sure. And I don't ask to be part of a lot of that. I just know through kind of talking. But yeah, so we spend a ton of money. And what we do is mostly it's postcards. So we send, 30,000 postcards out a month, just, hey, purchasing properties in the area, referrals. So if anybody that's watching this, if you ever find any property that's distressed, somebody trying to sell, preferably off market, we pay referral fees up to $2,500. Actually, Adam just sent me one the other day.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, we're probably gonna have to pay him. But referrals, we do a lot of outbound cold calling. I used to do that when I first started. Luckily, now I don't have to do it as much. We have a company that I think we have 8 cold callers, and they call like 8,000 people either a day or I think it's a week. So we just have all sorts of volume, bringing in types of leads. And then I have 2 people that actually work with me, that they pretty much schedule most of my appointments. So they're the ones talking to them. They're the ones getting, all of the ins and outs of situations, maybe what they're hoping for, price wise, gives me an idea. So that way it gives me the ability to just focus on what I probably do best, is just the buying factor. I'm a terrible organization, the back end paperwork side of things, and I'll be the first one to admit it, which is why I have people that I work with that kind of help me with that to help the company grow. But we spend a ton of money on marketing to get it out there, and pretty much, like I said, about 10 to 15 properties is what I'm purchasing. This year, we're obviously trying to scale that a little bit more. And it's funny, whenever I'm talking to somebody about it, and they ask, oh, well, how many properties do you purchase? And I say, 10 to 15. You can tell they're thinking I'm about to say like a year.
A year, yeah.
And I say a month, and they're like, oh my God. Yeah, we do quite a bit. So yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot of hours, a lot of time invested, follow-ups, this, that, everything else. So it's, I've been probably now in the 2.5 years I've purchased and been a part of probably 350 transactions.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I really was surprised when you said that I think you said 30 or 40,000 flyers you sent out a month. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah.
A lot of what I've been hearing recently, just from people who I follow in business and into entrepreneurship and stuff, they're like, most of the time you're already doing what you should be doing. You're just not doing enough.
Right.
You just need to do more.
Yeah.
More scale, more leads, because ultimately business is just a big math problem.
Yeah.
There's a percentage of your people who will convert every step of the stage. So if you have 30,000 people coming in, that might only produce the 10 to 15 houses you need, but that's all you need to actually
keep moving.
Exactly.
But then to kind of go off of your point on like the business side, it's like, at what point, you can't throw shit against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Don't know if we can swear, sorry. But you can't, you can't, because it's like, it's the basic math problem at a point, but at what point do you feel kind of capped out? Do you get to a side? Are you big enough to throw $100,000 at it? And I'm sure at some point that's where the company wants to be. Just being as close as I am to Eric, and kind of figuring out where the company we want, or he wants it, but also I like to try and be part of that to know. You don't want to throw $70,000 at it and you're still only buying 17 houses. At what point is there kind of like that happy medium?
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the hard thing. I will say, thank God I don't have to deal with that type of stuff, because it is a math problem. But in slow times, this is a slower time for us, because unfortunately a lot of the people that we deal with, if they're losing, if somebody's losing their house, or, whatever the case may be, they probably don't want to have to deal with it right around the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of trying to push it off. They've pushed it off this far. So they're like, well, what's an extra month? So, we're not getting as much coming in right now. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know what he does. Do we scale back on it, or where is it? But I know he is, big, involved in the numbers. Him and my dad are always back and forth, and figuring out what we need to do, breaking it down math problem wise, where I have to be, where this department has to be, that department, so everybody's kind of like a well-oiled machine. So we can then start maybe throwing more money at things to scale it more and more.
How much of a factor do you think the overall real estate market affects your business? Like if it's down, do you think people are more likely to sell, or if it's up, do you think they're more likely to sell?
So I haven't, when I started this was when the market was going crazy.
Yeah.
So I haven't really experienced, and I think, and don't get me wrong, if there's any, real estate experts out there, I just personally, I think at this point, 2008, 2009, I don't personally think, just based off of talking to a lot of people that have been in the industry for a long time, I don't think we'll get there. I also think there's way too many rules and regulations in place now that the Fed and everything's not going to allow that to happen. But I think as far as, when the market's good, obviously everybody's going to do good, because then you can kind of take some chances and maybe buy something at a number that you wouldn't necessarily normally do, because people are probably going to want to try and purchase it afterwards. And, I always say it doesn't matter what kind of market it is. A well-done renovated house, I feel, is just always going to sell. And if somebody really needs to buy a house or really wants to buy a house, they're probably going to do it, because we're, one, we're America, we're a nation of debt. So people want the next best thing. But, the human, I guess, intuition, or the human, what we do is, and I'm, unfortunately the same way. If I want it, I'm probably going to do it. And then if I need to refinance later, or whatever the case may be, if the interest rates aren't great. But I think when the market's down, probably helps a little bit more, because as bad as it sounds, people are probably starting to lose their house a little bit more, trying to figure out how to get out of it instead of the bank taking it. Maybe, we can help and put money in their pocket.
Yeah.
Or even, if we have to pivot a different direction, instead of them having to be out in a month, maybe they're out in a year. So there's a lot of different ways. I say, good market, we're always probably going to do good. Bad market, we're still probably going to do pretty decent, because of the way we're purchasing.
Yeah.
And it's because we are buying everything mostly off market. I'm not competing. I'm competing with other businesses that do what we do, but I'm not competing with the average folk who want to just buy a house, fix it up, and live there for 30 days. They're not looking for a profit, where we are as a business. So, yeah. I think that's probably the best way to explain that.
Yeah. Let's get into a little bit of like the habits and principles behind basically what makes you be successful. Because obviously you don't own the business, but it's very entrepreneurial, like the job you have. You know, you're running a small team, and you have unlimited upside of growth and potential. So obviously, and you're commission only. Yeah. So that obviously you need to be a self-motivator. So what do you do on a consistent basis, a daily basis? What habits do you have that have led to, success? Obviously, one of them is working late. You've said it multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked a lot of really late nights, long days. I could have a day where I have 4 or 5 appointments, so I'm starting at 8 o'clock and I don't get home till 8 o'clock. There's also a lot of driving. I have a company car that I drive, and I think we've had it for about 1.5 years, and it's almost got 70,000 miles on it. So it's a lot of driving, a lot of kind of in between. So it's just, making sure. Habit-wise, I'm probably not the best at, so I'm going to take a step back, kind of part of your question. Habit-wise, I'm probably just, in a general sense, I don't really go to the gym as much as I probably should, and my wife keeps pushing me, so now that I'm saying this, she's probably going to watch this and be like, all right, we're going to the gym. Yeah. When I used to be there. But I think I gave up a lot of sacrifices in that sense, because I was trying to get to where I'm at now, and now I'm where I'm at, and I want to get to that next level. So, a lot of sacrifices where, I didn't necessarily have a ton of family time, especially in the beginning. I would say the first year and a half, almost actually probably up to about 1.5 years. It was just, working all day, being away, being in appointments. If I had to take an appointment on a weekend, I was taking an appointment on a weekend. If I had to take it 7 o'clock at night, I'm taking it 7 o'clock at night. Because at that point when, especially in the beginning, and I didn't know when my next paycheck was coming, what happened was I didn't know what that appointment was going to be. I don't know if that's going to make me a couple $1,000s or not. So I needed to make sure that I was going on them. And unfortunately, with us being in a, I guess, service type based industry, I need to work around other people's schedule. It's not a 9 to 5 where everybody else is working 9 to 5. If they don't get home till 7 o'clock, but they need somebody to come and sit down with them, I'm going at 7 o'clock. So I had to really kind of wrap around that, and I had a really good support system from family and everybody around, to where I was able to make the sacrifices that I needed to make, especially in the beginning, to where I could work sun up to sundown, and then even when I got home, still sitting in my office trying to figure things out, running numbers, doing this, whatever needed to be done, taking late night phone calls, because all of our calls that come into the company are relayed to one person's phone, and then if not answered, it'll come to mine. So like taking those phone calls, but also, our company now has 11 or 12 employees. When I started, there was 4 of us. So it was a lot of sacrifice and a lot of just nonstop. Now everything's kind of delegated to certain people. But as far as like trying to stay disciplined, habits of just being consistent, I try and be as much as I can. The big running joke is, till I really even get home, and you can even ask Adam about this, that I think at their wedding they were going to get me a bag of chips, because the big joke is I come home and that's what I eat for dinner, the bag of chips. But I do need to be a little bit more, and now a little bit more, I don't even know if this is word, habitual. Like I need more of a habit-based type thing, or regimen or schedule. So that way, I can continue to stay motivated. Because I will say I've seen a lot of times with myself that I've gotten unmotivated, and I don't know if it's because of the way I feel, just not, working out, not doing this, not eating right. You lose motivation. And I think I need to get back to that. But I don't post that part so my wife sees it.
What are some of the systems you guys have in place, if any, to make sure that you keep on growing as, a company, and make sure that you keep on progressing and learning? And I guess that's a follow-up question, is what are some of the mistakes that you've made, and how do you make sure that you learn from them?
Yeah. I don't want to, because it's obviously not my company, but I don't want to divulge too much. But as far as, some of the things to kind of help with the growth and scaling, is, he's added a lot of people. Brought in, a lot of things, like I said a little bit earlier. One of the things that I'll be the first to admit is like my organizational skills are god awful. Because I'm a salesman. Most salesmen naturally are good at kind of putting on the blinders and focusing on what's next. So I didn't do very well with, so we have a whole CRM system, and after an appointment, putting in notes in there, and we kind of go through those. I would be like 3 or 4 weeks behind on putting in notes. So, he would call me and ask, and I would kind of get irritated because like I knew what was going on, but like I also understood that like as a business and as an owner, like he wants to be able to see kind of the overview. So kind of putting people in place, to help everybody else grow, so that way we can continue scaling to a point where we want to be. I know at one point, we want to be able to start purchasing in other states, kind of start branching out, but we need to have a solid core home base before we do any of that stuff. Yeah. So with his openness to, hey, where are some of the things that we're lacking, what can we do to fill or void those holes, and fix that so that way things don't get lost. So now everybody, we've just added another acquisitions person for the home buying side of things, where they'll take a little bit smaller portion of maybe some of the, but it's also going to help take some time for me. So I haven't taken a vacation. Like I haven't done anything in the last 2.5 years, because it's all been solely focused on this. So his openness to listen to everybody in the company of like what we need to do. Some of the mistakes I would say is business wise. I don't really know too much as far as his side, but
and this can be like in your experience. What are some things that you messed up with?
When I first started, bad purchases, and luckily, we have abilities to kind of work around things. And, I know he's had to go back to sellers for discounts because I didn't calculate my numbers correctly. That's probably one of the big things, is just when I was coming up learning how to run a renovation budget correctly, to be able to, because if I'm $10,000, $15,000 off on a renovation budget and I buy the property for the wrong number, that you're, thinking you're going to make 25 grand on it, that's now 10. And if anything else goes wrong, you can be upside down, especially depending on how you're purchasing it, whether you're purchasing private money, your own cash, whatever whatever it may be. So I think a lot of what I needed to get past was really being efficient on the buying side of things. Purchasing, I've made a lot of bad purchases. I shouldn't say a lot. I don't know. He might think differently, but so, and just learning from it, figuring out, what I needed to do, how I needed to get there, working on some of those things to make the numbers correct. I mean, and even for myself, I've purchased properties and trying to figure out when I'm doing renovations, it's like, well, what do you need to add? The one house that I'm renovating right now to flip, I feel like I'm just constantly throwing money at it because like it's worth it, but I needed to figure out when to stop. So that's probably one of the big mistakes, is that. And also and this is not really necessarily a mistake, but just more of like a learning side of like understanding that, like, as I was going through what I do and my daily job and everything, realizing what I was bad at. And that was a lot of that organizational back-end paperwork side of things, and being able to accept that and not getting frustrated when somebody asks about it. Just, hey, I didn't do it. I forgot about it. I'm just, because I constantly on my phone during the day, phone calls, in appointments. So I have a lot of things going on. So if I normally try and tell people, if there is something super important, to just email me, because then I can leave it unread. And then I know I need to get to that, because if you text me, if you tell me about it, I'm probably not going to get to it. It's come to a point now that like even my wife has Brandon, who I work with and does a lot of my scheduling, has his email address. So whenever we have like family things or anything else going on, she just emails him and he puts it on my calendar for me, which is awesome. Shout out to Brandon if you watch this, guys. My ride or die here. He's helped me through a lot to just stay organized. But it's come to that point. So I think mistake wise, everybody that comes into this industry that does what we do, as kind of what the role I have, I think we're all going to kind of make that mistake, especially when you're new. And that's just being able to purchase properties correctly and then figuring out from there how to do it. Because the worst thing is having to call a seller and say, hey, I know I bought your house for $100 grand, but I really screwed up. I need to buy it for 80 grand. And then they get mad at you, or they go somewhere else, or having to say, hey, it's just not going to work out for us. Here's a couple other options that we can do. So those are some of the worst phone calls, and I hated having those. So I figured out how to be very minimal on that side.
Make less mistakes.
Yes.
So definitely sounds like self-awareness is a big factor in how you got better. You realize that you sucked at the organizational stuff, so you hired out those weaknesses.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm still consistently trying to do.
Yeah.
Even just figuring out the things that I really, really hate doing
Yeah,
and hiring
exactly.
that out. I think the last question I have is going back to basically when you were learning, when you first took on the job, you said you were like a sponge learning. Obviously, I think that is a big factor in being able to consistently grow, is basically not having a big ego
Right.
and understanding that like you can learn something, not necessarily from everybody, but like you can learn a lot from other people, and being open to that,
Yeah.
just learning.
Yeah. I mean, I absorbed everything, and not even just from the company, Eric, the owner who trained me. We had a guy that worked with us that, ended up just kind of going off and doing his own thing. He was probably the best person I've ever heard on phones. And I think it's just like everything is a skill. I can help train some of the people that I work with on the phone to have the conversations and make it more of a natural conversation instead of just, when was your roof replaced? How many windows are in the house? Like it's got to be more of a, there's things that we try and figure out when I'm on the phone before we get to an appointment, so I have an idea. But instead of making it just like the monotonous questionnaire. So he was probably one of the best. And even to this day, it's something that unfortunately I think he's just born with. Great on the phones, great at building relationships, great at talking. So, kind of listening, having that there where I could absorb, how conversations were more of an organic conversation over the phone, how Eric was buying houses and having those conversations there. But even just, I have a lot of friends now in the industry that are even you would look at competitors because they're another business, but I have a lot of friends where I've talked to them just kind of running into each other, doing business together, where, I've also learned from them as well. And I hope, to a point now also, some of these people have learned from me. I'm not saying I'm the world's greatest, but I do feel like in the industry, in kind of the area, I do pretty well at what I do. But I just literally sucked everything up that I could. Even now I do, because I don't know everything and I'm still new. I haven't been in it a very long time. And there's guys that, I say, hey, I own, I have 11 properties, in my rental portfolio, and I buy, 10 to 15 houses a month for the company. And that's like chump change to them. They're like, I think I buy 11 properties, a week for my portfolio. They have 1,000 properties in it. So I just try, even now, constantly trying to figure out, one, just, even for myself, to how I want to build, because my goal is to have a generational wealth. I always kind of say, and I forget where I heard it, but somebody told me one time, being rich is cool, but being wealthy is really freaking sweet, So kind of having that generational wealth of where, you don't have the daily grind of just going. So even whether it's in our industry, I'm great friends with Adam, who was very, very successful. Just talking with him, I know him and I probably talk daily because he's also now trying to build a portfolio. So he's kind of trying to ask my opinion on some things. And I'm trying to help guide him where I can. But, I just took and take everything that I can, because I'm never going to know everything until I'm, I don't know, Elon Musk or whoever is the richest person in the world right now.
Everything.
Exactly. But to a point where, I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable. But to a point where, I feel financially and, time freedom to where I don't have to constantly go. But yeah, I was when I started, under a very great foundation of where I needed to start. So I kind of had a jump start. I know there's been a lot of turnover in the industry. Not our company, but just in general. And I think it is just from the very beginning, commission based. You don't know really what you're doing. It's a different type of sales. So being able to have the guidance that I've had and being taken under the wing by the owner of our company has been, astronomical to kind of my success now.
Yeah, that's something that I've personally always done, where I feel like most people are very closed-minded, especially when they're a lot of people have negative beliefs when it comes to making a lot of money because they think they're being greedy, and that's not true at all, especially like when it's generational wealth. You're building wealth for your family, you're building wealth for anybody to contribute to other organizations, stuff like that. But where I was getting at was I've always been really good at just like getting around people who are doing way better than me. It's kind of part of the reason why I started this podcast. Is just have conversations like this and just not say much, but create questions and just absorb everything and learn from it, and actually like hear the questions and not just be like, oh, that's cool, but be like, okay, how can I use this? And how can I change and how can I improve from that? Yeah. One last question to get into what you just said. You just quickly said, I don't think I'm ever going to be comfortable. What do you mean by that?
I mean, money's comfortable wise, I get comfortable in my daily what I do, I guess you can say, and that's where I have to. There's even sometimes where even the owner of our company or even Michaela or my wife or somebody that notices that like I might be just a little bit off for a day is because I kind of catch myself being content more than comfortable. So not content, but like comfortable, content kind of go hand in hand to a point where it's like, okay, I do the same stuff every day. Every day is different, but the end, appointments, follow-ups, talking to people, conversations. So I'll get into like this where I like just don't really talk to anybody because I like need to like refocus so I don't get comfortable of oh, okay, well, yeah, I'll get that tomorrow or this or that. Like, but in an overall grand scheme of things, getting comfortable, I just, there's always another step, whether it's, what I do as a job, building my own portfolio, having time with family, like it doesn't matter what it is. There's always kind of that next step to it. And I just don't ever think I'm going to get to a point where, I'm good. Like, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Even, I'd love to retire by 40 and be able to have a portfolio of rentals that kind of pays everything, but even then I don't think that I'm going to actually be retired. Just because like I always need to be doing something. I always want a little bit more, and I don't say this to feel like bragging or conceited, but like I never could fathom 4 years ago making the money that I make now, and now that I do, I'm like, how do I get more? Like, what do I need to do to continue to get to the next level? And that's something that, I'm constantly battling. I don't ever think I'm going to get to that. And kind of going back to your point where, you based off the sponge thing, people that are better than you, or I shouldn't say better, but, are more successful, whatever the case may be. I'm always doing the same thing. And, we always go to Cars and Coffee and, yes, okay, cool. I have a cool car that most people would love to own. And I go to these Cars and Coffee events and I'm like, oh, cool, I have that. And then somebody pulls up in $1 million car. Yeah. My first question normally is, and not because I'm nosy, is what do you do and how the heck do you do it?
Yeah.
Like what else can I add to my repertoire of everything that I do? Again, because I don't want to be comfortable now. Obviously if somebody's got a crazy company that is a weird niche, I'm not going to do that, but I just am always trying to figure out what can be done to better myself, better the people that are around me, and that could be people that are already, hopefully, even when I am in a setting of something like that, maybe there is something that I can do to help that person. They can help me, and so on and so forth. So I do the same thing you do, try and figure out, where that, but I would just never just be, okay, I'm good now. I make X, Y, Z, I'm bringing in this much a month, whatever the case may be, or a year. I'm good. I can sit back. Like, I'm never going to be that way. I'm never going to feel comfortable. I'm never going to feel to a point where I can just be content with what I'm doing, because I just, one, get too bored, and two, there's always that next stage.
Yeah. Few closing thoughts on that is we all have internal thermostats basically, and say it's set at 62 degrees. If you start making less money, if you start doing things that you think are below what you think you're worth, and you say you're at 60 degrees, you're going to start doing more. You're going to feel motivated because you're doing less than you think you're worth. Same thing happens on the other end. When you start making more than you expect to make, when you start having more free time, then you will start relaxing more. You will stop working those late nights, things like that. You'll cool down. So it basically comes down to staying hungry and hitting that point. And when you start making more, not being like, oh shit, I shouldn't be working this much. Be like, oh, I can get used to this, and keep growing from that. Wealth is just money. I wrote that down. No, wealth isn't just money. I put that down, where a lot of this conversation has been about like growing the company and trying to get more sales. But at the end, you mentioned that, to a point, you're going to have a lot of money, maybe more money than you ever want to do with. But then you can change your hunger to not like, how can I make more money, but how can I make the same amount of money, or how can I make more money and have way more time with my family?
Right.
Or how can, I make 10 times the amount of money and work half as much?
Right.
Like, that's where it gets interesting, where you change your hunger, not just to making a little bit more money, but to creating a greater quality of life.
Yeah. And I think that's more of that generational side of things, back to the statement, and I always go back to it because I don't forget where I heard it, but like, being rich is cool. I look at rich as being, you have the cool things and doing this and doing that, but that generational wealth, and I look at wealth, like you said, more than just money. Like, yes, money doesn't solve all your problems, but it is a big factor. I mean, the leading divorce and I think suicide rate is because of financial issues, and that's, don't fact check me on that, but I think it's very it's one of those things that finances. I mean, think about it. When you don't have money, what's happening? It sucks. So, but also time. It's great to have millions and millions of dollars, but if you can't do anything with it, you can't have vacations with your family, you can't watch your kid grow up, you can't do any of those things, like, that's not enjoyable. Like, what, cool, you have 6 Lamborghinis, but guess what, you don't drive them because you're constantly working. So I think, yes, there's always going to be the growth, but there's always going to be, and wanting more, but there is that happy medium, like you mentioned, of figuring out where you're continuously growing, but you also have that great quality of life. And that's one of the big things. I think it's kind of really started to hit a lot more, is like, okay, how can I continue to work where I'm at, because I don't ever plan on going anywhere. I mean, I love who I work with. I love what I do. And I love, the ability to kind of help the company grow as much as possible, as still just being an employee. But it's something that, I love it, but I'll still probably always do it to a point. Whether I'm buying 5 houses and, we have 2 people that are doing what I used to do, and that's more up to the owner, but also kind of where I'm at. But, I want to be able to spend more time with, my daughter coming, and those are things that I'm looking forward to, and trying to figure out how to continually work to grow within the company as a person, help the company grow, but also, like you mentioned, having that constant growth of income coming in when still having the time to be able to spend with family. That's probably the most important thing. And I think if you would have asked me that same question, I'm trying to think back of when we started dating so I don't get in trouble. 6 years ago, I probably would have said money was the main factor. Because, I wanted to make more money. I wanted money. Money's great. It helps a lot of things. It gives you the ability to be free. And I still don't, I do well, but I'm still not anywhere close to where I want to be. But yeah, I mean, time now is probably